Engineers at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear plant are struggling to stop hundreds of tons of radioactive groundwater from seeping into the Pacific Ocean every day. Crews have started pumping some of the water from the ground as a temporary measure to contain the leak. Government officials say about 1,000 tons of groundwater could be flowing from a hillside into the soil below the plant every day. Of that, about 300 tons filters through a contaminated area and is laced with radioactive substances. Then it seeps into the sea. Another 300 tons bypasses the contaminated area. The remaining 400 tons of water is leaking into the basements of the buildings housing reactors 1 to 4. That water is also contaminated, and it's being pumped out and stored. Crews at the plant have been injecting soil-hardening chemicals into the ground on part of the site to stop the water leaking into the ocean. But there are concerns this effort may be pushing water levels higher above the barrier. TEPCO workers are trying to counter this effect by pumping out some of the water from a new well. They are also planning to sink about 30 5-meter-long pipes into the ground. Workers will use the pipes to pump out groundwater starting next week. They hope to drain 100 tons per day. Long term, they are considering freezing the soil beneath the buildings. Crews would bury pipes and inside them circulate coolant kept at -40 degrees Celsius. The frozen soil would act as a dam to prevent groundwater from reaching the contaminated area. But it could take 1 to 2 years to complete the project, and maintaining the cooling operations will be extremely costly.
A TEPCO spokesperson says the company has known for the past 2 years that a massive amount of groundwater was flowing beneath the Fukushima power plant. The official says TEPCO experts estimated hundreds of tons of the water could reach the ocean daily.
The figure is based on rough records of groundwater we collected. The figure was not reached with the help of outside experts. We collected it ourselves.
Until last month, TEPCO officials had denied the possibility that contaminated groundwater was leaking into the ocean. The official says he is unable to explain why it took 2 years to disclose this fact.
Officials in charge of the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant say they've run into another problem. They say a wall they built to stop contaminated groundwater from seeping into the sea has failed. The Industry Ministry estimates that 300 tons of tainted groundwater are flowing into the Pacific Ocean every day. Engineers from Tokyo Electric Power Company injected chemicals into the earth to harden it and create an underground wall. But they were unable to solidify the soil closest to the surface. TEPCO workers recently dug a well just inside a new wall to monitor the water level. They found it was slightly higher than the top of the wall. The workers are pumping out contaminated groundwater as a temporary measure.
Japanese have used the bombing anniversaries to talk about the destructive force of nuclear weapons. Some have spoken about the risks posed by nuclear power since the 2011 accident at Fukushima Daiichi. Japanese leaders are now getting more involved in the work to control the plant. And they're trying to accelerate the cleanup of contaminated communities around the damaged facility. Environment Ministry representatives say they plan to add some higher-ranking officials to the workforce of 430 government employees assigned to the cleanup. The new additions have expertise in public works projects and land purchases. They'll take the lead on the difficult task of building intermediate storage sites to hold contaminated soil and other waste. Municipal leaders are reluctant to allow the facilities to be built within their borders because of fears about radiation.
The people in Nagasaki are marking a day that's never far from their minds, the day an atomic bomb was dropped on their city. Every year on this date, they gather together to remember with words, songs and prayers. This year, many of those who spoke at the Nagasaki peace ceremony had words of criticism for the Japanese government. NHK World's Hiro Morita reports from Nagasaki.
It's been 68 years since that day. But Shohei Tsuiki still remembers the things he did, the things he saw, how he felt. People charred black, a mother holding her dead child.
I've been lucky to have been able to live as long as I have. What I want most is the immediate removal of these genocidal weapons of mass destruction from the face of the earth.
In the last days of the World War II, a U.S. warplane dropped an atomic bomb on Nagasaki. The explosion killed almost everyone within 1 kilometer instantly. Over 70,000 people died by the end of the year. People from Nagasaki, from across Japan and around the world gather together every year to remember. At 11:02, the time the bomb was dropped, they paused for a moment of silence. Representatives of victims' families, survivors, and the mayor presented a list of more than 3,400 names. The names are those of survivors who died this year and others newly recognized as victims. Through the years, more than 162,000 people have been honored. Many of those who spoke criticized the Japanese government. In April, representatives of more than 17 countries reached an agreement at a conference for the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Their statement said nuclear weapons should never be used under any circumstances. Japanese delegates refused to sign.
If the Japanese government cannot support the remark that nuclear weapons should never be used under any circumstances, it implies that the government would approve of their use under some circumstances.
Japanese rely on the nuclear umbrella of their U.S. allies as part of their security. Still, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said they have a duty because of their history.
Japanese are the only people in the world to have suffered an atomic bombing during wartime. As such, we have a responsibility to help bring about a world without nuclear weapons.
The average survivor is more than 78 years old. Many are working as hard as ever to tell their stories so that theirs will be the last city to suffer such horrors. Hiro Morita, NHK World, Nagasaki.
The Stockholm International Peace Research Institute reports 17,000 nuclear warheads are held in arsenals around the world. 8 countries possess them. The US and Russia together account for over 90% of the stockpile.